Give it up one more time for Lujan. My name is Amadeo Hughes. For those that don't know me, I'm a graphic designer by day and an actor by night, specifically in my dreams. But Peter was very kind to invite me to this special night. So, big thank you once again to the Jean-Cocteau cinema. Peter and I were classmates in high school, didn't really know you all too well, but we reconnected and shared a love of filmmaking. So thank you all for taking time out of your days and coming to support the future artists and auteurs.
Yay!
How you feeling?
Feeling good, yeah. Last scene rumbled some tummy, but
How so?
yeah, I mean it's an interesting thing to take risk with art, and I think I felt very strongly about this risk that I was willing to take, and yeah, I mean, yeah.
Let's take it from the top because I got a lot that I wanted to ask you. When I first saw this, I knew that you were making a movie, and I was definitely interested from the start. And when you approached me that first day that we met, this might have been like in the spring of this year. I hadn't seen you in a long, long time. I didn't know what you were up to. Last thing I knew, you were wearing like a Lakers jersey, and that was like the last time I saw you. That's Peter. And it was so cool to hear that you were in film and that you were a production assistant, that you were actively working on set, that you had these big ideas and you were screenwriting and you were like directing. You wanted to direct at least, and it just felt cool to have that conversation, that connection, because I want to be an actor and I'm working toward that. And you and I kind of bounced off each other, so that felt good. And then you sent me this, finally seeing it after, I bet, a long time. Feels good to have a finished product, and especially showing that finished product to this audience of people. That's a special thing. And I saw it, I was like, Enmity. What the hell does that mean? His parents must be English teachers. And so, enmity, it's a noun. The act, or the feeling of being opposed to or hostile to something or someone, actively opposed to. I guess my first question for you is, where were you on Canyon Road when you had the idea for this movie?
Yeah, so I actually, the restaurant we shot in, El Farol, I worked there for 3.5, 4 years in high school, and I mean, really, like where it really all started before I even knew I wanted to write, I would have these thoughts while I was working these 12-hour shifts, hating my life. I was like, the difference between eating at a restaurant and working at a restaurant are like two completely different things, but like two completely different experiences, and then like furthermore, just kind of this idea of like, you think about, the people who eat at El Farol and the people who work at El Farol, and it's two completely different socioeconomic classes of people. And it's really interesting to me because I think that structure in such a confined area actually applies to Santa Fe altogether. I think, we've seen this sort of like juxtaposition in the last decade or so between the north side of town and the south side of town, and I've always thought that was interesting. I don't really have the like answers as to why it is that way, but I think raising that question is something that was important to me in terms of this idea of like the people really sweating behind the scenes in this kitchen, metaphorically even the kitchen, like, more often than not, they're not going to be able to, reap the benefits of their work, which is something that I've always thought was interesting.
When did you first? When were you first conscious of this sort of these dissimilarities?
Man, I mean, I think it was pretty evident from the get-go, from when I started working on Canyon Road, because you see the clientele and it's like, these aren't people from Santa Fe, like, and I thought that was so interesting because, I don't know, I think like downtown is like really like kind of marketed as this like really authentic and true place, who like to cultures that aren't currently populating those areas, that aren't currently, and I think, it's up for debate, but I think that's really where it started.
So, the restaurant owner, he mentions the painting and the artist of the painting. The name of that artist was Occulto. What was your reasoning behind that name choice?
Yeah. So again, this is a proof of concept. So what we just watched was a 15-page screenplay adapted off of a 175-page screenplay with backstory and everything. And so I've spent the last year and a half, 2 years developing this artist character, Occulto, for those who speak Spanish, means hidden. And again, I kind of wanted to, that whole scene, this idea of fine art and, you know, the enormous prices that come along with fine art, and then like putting that into the context of the employees there, or putting that into the context of real life. And really that's kind of the idea behind the Occulto character, was to have this sort of silent force sort of recreating a culture that wasn't his to begin with. And clearly it changed a lot in the adaptation to the 15-page version, but in the feature-length version, the idea is, you know, is this artist pawning off a culture that isn't his.
It always seems so interesting as well, kind of like the industry of fine art, the business of fine art, and how kind of mysterious that seems, and like money laundering, I guess, and how certain things are made, or why they have that price, or why it's even being celebrated as a piece of fine art when perhaps people just see it as a blank canvas or a bunch of blue on a single square. So I thought that was just like an interesting thing, the name Occulto. I say that kind of funny, but yeah, no, I like that. It was intentional.
Yeah. And disclaimer, we got the painting from Joel Nakamura, who's an unbelievable artist. This was, you know, again, and it changed in the screenplay, as, you know, in the original, you know, it's an extremely abstract piece where anyone would be able to be like, I mean, you see the paintings where like it's a canvas of blue that sells for $3 million, and like, so that's the original, how it is in the original screenplay. But, you know, when it came to actually producing the thing, you know, the first person I thought of was Joel, in terms of, you know, considering he's such a close family friend, and, you know, being able to show his work was like really important. But, you know, like that was interesting, because I think, you know, the whole idea of fine art, you can kind of, you know, you can play both sides of the field, right? You can say that it's, you know, it's not worth anything, but like, you know, both sides are right. Like, fine art does play a cultural, like a super crucial part to like Western, you know, like art in general. Like fine art, fine visual art is like is a very like a staple of Western culture. And I think, you know, that it'll always have its day, but, you know, putting it in context is always like, you know, who would spend that much money on a painting, right? So I think that's kind of where it started, with the painting at least.
Yeah, I guess subjectivity of artistic merit and subjectivity of value. But well, that's good stuff, man. So yeah, I was about to ask, like, what was the story behind that painting? Why that specific painting, and why also did it change from being an abstract piece to becoming a more defined, almost native inspired?
Well, so this became, like, I would have loved to sort of, you know, have a super deep and theoretical answer behind this, but again, this taps into the logistics of filmmaking, in the sense where, you know, we're coming up on a deadline, where we're reaching a place where, okay, we're shooting the scene with the painting in a week, and, you know, I need a really good painting. And so, you know, that's kind of, I would have loved, again, like this painting in the original and the feature is like super specific and detailed, but again, like with guerrilla style filmmaking, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do and, like, you know, make it happen. So that was the instance, and, you know, in the end, I was like, I couldn't have been happier with the way it looked, the way it, you know, worked in the piece.
I thought it fit especially well considering the themes of the film, kind of like this. I don't necessarily want to assign this to the particular artist, to this particular work, but kind of just like the overall theme of the movie, where it tends to focus on gentrification or even cultural appropriation and somewhat of a distribution of misguided artistic kind of
Right. Yeah. So
Like,
yeah. I
you
mean,
know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. And I think like like in that sense that it really worked out that it kind of gave like the vibe of a piece that may not have been done by I think like you could go either way about it, but I think the hieroglyphics and the sort of that vibe of it fit with the idea of a culture sort of like going away in a way.
I mean, Ryan, the character of the restaurant owner, says, this artist is from belongs to the world, essentially, mostly Europe, but worldwide. So I suppose it's that international influence that is brought forth. But like, does that become a problem at some point, especially when you assign perhaps a price tag like that?
So I think one thing that's interesting about that is like, I mean, here read the question. Sorry, I lost it.
No problem. So I noticed that the score was originally composed by Danny Martinez. Aside of course from like supporting fellow creatives, what was your choice behind having the score of the film be original?
Yeah. So that was extremely important. I 100% had to have an original score for this one because, not only like you said, I like to have a piece that's completely done by young creatives, right? And so Danny Martinez is a score composer that I met in New York when I did a semester interning for a production company. And I reached out to her again about the project and told her what I was doing. And, she was excited, but, I told her, there were a bunch of things that went into the score because in my opinion, score in film is as important as the picture unfolding. Because, as the film is going, the score is simultaneously telling a different story. And so there were a bunch of different factors that went into this. There was 2 scores in particular that I sent her. It was the Silver Linings Playbook score and then the Good Times score. And I told her that was the tempo that I wanted to work with. And then along with that, I sent her a bunch of different northern New Mexican norteño songs that I wanted her to kind of infuse into the score because, again, this is, it's really important to have that, every aspect of the film kind of like tie into the, the heart of Santa Fe. So initially I sent her all like 4 of those things, and then she sent me this file a week later, and I thought it was great.
It definitely hits harder than copyright-free music for movies or like band sound. So that definitely gives it the individual touch that is so important to, when you want to be a director, when you want to be an auteur, when you want to have control over your entire vision, to fulfill that, it has to be each individual piece. It can't just be like, okay, let's be really tight on the cinematography, but we can probably outsource the color, or we can outsource the music.
And I think that's something too that like all the filmmakers that I love, every fabric of the film is, you can feel that there's an author behind it. And that's what I want to do with my films. I want my films to be extremely, like, I want them to resonate, and I want the audience to be able to tell that this was, that this was made by, like through, actual like hard work, and like, there was like an actual, like an artist behind it. A lot of times I think today, what with the, Marvel Cinematic Universe streaming monsters, I think we tend to kind of stray away from these really individualistic, independent films that, again, are crucial to our society.
So, what is your perfect image of cinematography? Well, we kind of discussed it. We met in the coffee shop a couple days ago. It was Alfonso Cuarón that said something interesting about how cinema was at its best, right? It's in its most pure form in the 90s or early 2000s, when you could go to any movie theater and you could see the big blockbuster films, but alongside that, you could see the small foreign film, you could see the independent film, you could see a short film. And it was more than just this very commercial experience. It was more kind of holistic, as in terms of cinema as an art form.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I think, like, in terms of cinematography, like, you touch on, like, cinematography stuff. That's the question?
Cinema, like
yeah,
cinema itself.
Okay,
yeah.
Cinema in general, yeah. I mean, to me, Scorsese said this one time. He said that cinema is something that, you can watch it, and then you can watch it a couple years later, and 10 years later, and each time it's going to be different, and each time it's going to hit something different in you. And I think that's the mark of a great film, because no matter how many times you watch it, there's still more to learn about yourself, and there's still more to learn about the world. And so, I think that, regardless of the medium, I think there's clever things we can do. We can tell exciting, visually exciting stories and hide the subtext in clever ways. And I think like that in and of itself is sort of what I want to do, right? I want to get people to sort of think about why the filmmaker chose to do this. And then, a couple years later, they kind of realize it. Or, again, it's just, I think that's where it's born.
My next question for you is, what were you thinking of when you were developing the character of James?
So the character of James, played by Gilberto Morales, who, unfortunately I don't think he was able to make it tonight. I developed James and Tonio simultaneously, because James and Tonio, in my estimation, they represent these competing instincts in this city. Because for those growing up here, you're familiar with the New Mexico, unfortunately, has the nickname the Land of Entrapment, right? There's this idea that sort of like you can't really get out of Santa Fe, and it's Santa Fe, it is what it is, right? But the whole idea, the line that kind of describes this juxtaposition between the two is when Tonio says it is what it is, but then James says, it's not what it is, and we can change it. And I think that, that idea is like where these characters were born, of two competing thought processes of how to develop and how to sort of get yourself out of the land of entrapment, so to speak.
And then, unfortunately, it takes a turn for the worse. You try to change the system, and the system buries you. Right. Is that kind of what? Yeah.
So I think, right, the whole sequence at the end, I think, was a symbol of sort of, it's this, again, I don't have the answers to these things, to why it's the land of entrapment, or why these sort of like systemic things keep repeating themselves. But I do think that there's like a thought process at times where it is unbeatable, and like regardless of what you do, I think there's sometimes, like kind of like you said, the system can swallow you up, and I think that's partially, I guess, where that sequence came from. Yeah.
Especially if you're up to no good.
Yeah, and that's just, so that's what's interesting, I think, to me as well, is, Tonio committed a robbery, he committed a crime. He literally stole a painting, and so, he got in trouble. But that's sort of the thing of like, he's taking his culture back, right? That's where the story really came from. The feature script is about, instead of 2 boys, it's 5 boys, and instead of 1 painting, it's 6 paintings. And the whole theme of it is these boys are stealing their culture back. And so that's kind of what I wanted to illustrate in this short. And obviously, unfortunately, it doesn't work, but, and again, I don't have the answer, but I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
So, you kind of already discussed a little bit about this, but like Tonio's development, it seemed like that was side by side with James's development. And to me, it almost seems like kind of like the balancer of James's perhaps naive optimism, and then he's kind of more like the, man, I don't know if I can really do this, like I've been through before, this is gonna set me back, like do you really wanna, what was your, can you go a little bit deeper in terms of the character of
Tonio? So Tonio, he would love to get out of Santa Fe, right? That's the end goal, but he, unfortunately, as he said, he's been in jail before, his father's incarcerated, and so he has unfortunately been, adopted this belief that, there isn't anything that is going to change this. And James is here, right? That saying we can, and he's the optimism in this situation. But again, it talks about that naivete, about how he, thinks this one plan is gonna like work it, everything's gonna work out, like it'll be good. Whereas James, as the realist, is able to sort of, raise these concerns, but at the end of the day, they end up doing it because, the end goal is to get out. So that's kind of where it was.
I like that. So, to once again discuss the character of the restaurant owner, Ryan, who condescends to James on his apparent ignorance of fine art. What is fine art? Oh, you don't appreciate this because you don't appreciate fine art. Are we to argue that this judgment is misguided and that the character of Ryan is perhaps the one who's ignorant as well? But that kind of ties into the subjectivity of art.
Yeah, well, I think they're both ignorant. I think they're both ignorant to both sides, and I think that's something that we see in all kinds of places. You can even go up to Congress and talk about how people don't agree on both sides, right?
Even to judge the character of another person based on their taste or based on how well aware they are of, I suppose, art or of culture or of whatever. I mean, there are very intelligent people that only focus on themselves, like maybe in remote areas, just as there are very ignorant people at the highest levels of society, as perceived by, I suppose, us,
Right. And I think that's kind of sort of what you just said is sort of what I was trying to illustrate is that, no one ignorance is more ignorant than another ignorance, if that makes sense. So, like thinking about that of like, yeah, this kid's grandma's house, probably was $15,000. So for him, this is like mind blowing. But for the restaurant owner, he's in a position where he's been around this his whole life. He owns this place. So this is like a cherry on top of everything. This is an afterthought for him. And so again, that idea of like there isn't like one side isn't more ignorant. They're both ignorant to like the sides.
Do you think that sequence also somewhat illustrates a great misunderstanding of each other?
Yeah, and I think also like not only a great misunderstanding, but a refusal to understand in a way, a sort of a reluctance to see the other person's side of things, and so like who knows where that came from? Maybe that came from deep inside me, but I think eventually, like when I'm writing it, that's the idea is that there isn't one side that's always gonna like be the right side.
And that's what makes it interesting. Conflict is interesting. So my next question, James specifically refers to Santa Fe as our city. Can you elaborate?
Right. So this was again sort of the idea of the feature, and then obviously as the adaptation of the short came to be, was the this idea that this is a city built upon Spanish heritage and Mexican heritage and Native American heritage, yet the people reaping the benefits, financially speaking, more oftentimes than not, are not of those demographics. So I thought it was interesting. It would be an interesting thing. Again, it goes back to that idea, taking the culture back, and I guess that's what.
So the film, to me, and you can please tell me if you disagree, it considers the subjects of gentrification and cultural appropriation, to name a couple. It seems over and over that the traditions and histories of people are often repackaged and sold, or even used against them, against the people that they belong to, prompting a rapid loss of identity and authenticity. What are your thoughts on that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that part of that was a big factor in writing the script of like, well, if this is in the last 10 years, like, what's it gonna look like 100 years from now? What's it gonna look 75 years from now? Like, is it possible? Like, again, I don't have the answer, but is it possible to eradicate an entire culture? Not that it's a malicious thing or anything, but just like you said, by sort of naturally speaking, like that's how it has become, and so sort of being able to recognize that, I think, is something that's going to be really important in terms of preserving so much of this sort of like rich culture.
And that I'm a firm believer in that we can appreciate so many cultures around the world, and we can like immerse ourselves in those and learn from them just as much as they can learn from us, and that, you know, we want to maybe share that with other people through art, through some sort of other forms of expression. But when is that appropriation versus appreciation? Where is that line drawn?
Yeah, right.
Is that with a price tag, or is that
right? I mean, if you
gain of some sort?
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, anyone could answer that question. Where is the line, right? I don't think, you know, there isn't a one line that you can sort of be like, and that's sort of the dangerous part about it, is that, you know, there isn't a clear set sort of like, you know, and you can't really have set guidelines in film and in art altogether, but, you know, that idea was, yeah, like, who knows, but it's happening. You know, it is happening, and who knows how rapid it'll keep happening, how much it'll keep happening, but, you know, I think that it's there on some level, and again, I don't have the answers, but I think it's important to sort of like raise it to a surface that can kind of be talked about at least.
I've been cynical for a long time. And I've kind of seen galleries in town, or galleries, you know, all over the place, seem more dedicated to, instead of this appreciation of art from all over the world, it seems to be more of like the building of a brand, or even like the building of someone trying to acquire something, acquire lots of collectors, acquire lots of currency, acquire lots of attention, acquire lots of...
And I think also what's interesting is that, you know, Santa Fe is a very, like as we know, an extremely art-centered town. Like, you know, it's one of, you know, Canyon Road's one of the most famous streets for art on earth. And like, I think that it's kind of like what you're saying of like, I don't know if it's the appreciation or anymore, or if it's just people are understanding Santa Fe is a somewhat untapped market, in the sense of like, there could be, you know, there's gold to be found in Santa Fe, I think is what I, in my estimation, what I see.
As in like I found this gold and now I'm gonna melt it down and make it something else.
Right, and it's like, let me get a house, just a quick little summer house downtown, so I can go and sell my art there in the summers and then go somewhere else in the winters.
I definitely think, you know, different cultural perspectives, of course, can coexist, and as it should, and that should probably be the case, you know, in a perfect world everywhere. But yeah, that's you gave me a lot to think about. I'm still thinking about it, so moving on before I lose myself. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. The crucifixion is without doubt the most shocking sequence of this film. What was your intention with that statement?
So, me personally, I've always felt it's incredibly important to write, you know, like to let go of everything and just really write what I feel. So, I've always had this, you know, I've always had an interesting relationship with religion, in the sense where I've been confused on what I believe in, right? And so, furthermore, whether this is, you know, whether or not this is how most people think, you know, I think that the idea that, you know, God has a plan for you, and I think the idea of religion is really good. But at the same time, I think on the flip side of that, thinking that everything is going to work out because God has a plan for you, in some situations can breed stagnancy and can breed sort of, you know, complacency, in the sense where you don't, you know, right, you're not focused on the external things, because, you know, God has a plan for you. And so, again, don't have the answers, but that's something that I think I've been grappling with for some time, that it's an interesting thing to think about, that like, you know, like just the ideals behind it. And so, you know, I knew it was, you know, it'll ruffle feathers and stuff, but I think that, you know, part of art is to provoke. And I think that, you know, especially with my films, I'd love to, you know, raise eyebrows and to get questions, you know, going. And so, you know, it's something that's controversial, but I think, it's something that I thought out a lot, and I thought, you know, alternatives, and it just, to me, that's where the story went.
It was almost like, not to say that this is assuming that Tonio is Catholic or does fall into that religious belief, but it was almost as if what we were saying earlier, that culture being used against you, that history being used against you, and you paying the price for it because other people decided to place that upon you.
And that's it. And that's the thing of, like, you know, your own thing against you, right? And so, excuse me. So I think that, yeah, I mean, that played a large part in it as well. But yeah, those main things were the pillars of deciding that, like, okay, I'm really gonna do this.
My next question for you is kind of moving on to more of like the greater filmmaking, because I think this is a massive achievement. I'm very proud of you, and I think this is awesome. I'm so glad I got to connect more, and I got to know you better, and it just feels different. Like high school sucks, you know?
Yeah.
It's so much better getting out of that and kind of seeing each other for who we really are and what we really want to do. So, big congratulations to you. So let's say that I had a film and I was ready to shoot it. Finally, it was like 5 minutes short, whatever. What advice would you give?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, I was trying to figure that answer out for a very long time. And I mean, it really just, what I've come down to is, I mean, you have to have your story. You have to have a script. That's step one. If you want to, oftentimes I think filmmakers who are scared to write wait for a script to land on their desk. And oftentimes that does not happen. So if you want to direct films, you have to write films to direct. So that's the first step, is having a script to actually, you know, write. And then, you know, you have to find people that that you want to work with and that you are, you know, comfortable working with. So me and Eric Castillo, who I don't know where he is right now, but he was my camera operator, my director of photography. And we actually, we first connected, I think, like 2 years ago, and I kind of just expressed these things to him that I wanted to write and direct. And it was that same thing of, like, you know, you just gotta have stuff to, you know, write and direct. So, you know, having him there was instrumental, because, you know, being able to be on set is like, you know, it's that day that you've been dreaming of every day, this is my set, and then you're there, and then, you know, having a rock like Eric to be, you know, to be able to sort of, you know, facilitate things in ways as a first-time director that I wouldn't have been able to. So, you know, you have to make sure you have a, you know, a solid crew around you that, you know, is on the same page, because one weak link can ruin an entire production. And I mean, I think you just got to stay honest to yourself. You gotta really, really just make it happen. I mean, with this script, my school had promised me that they were going to finance it, and at the end of my spring semester. And then a week before school ended, they pulled the funding altogether, every cent of it. And so I was like, well, I don't know what to do now. So essentially what happened after that is I just started sending it to everybody, anyone I knew. Like, please help me, help me, help me. I think I ended up with like sending it to like 35 people that potentially could have helped me finance it. Got 34 no's. But one day, obviously, I got a phone call from Elizabeth Stallmer, who's creative director of Stagecoach Foundation here in Santa Fe. And she informed me that Milton Reese, who's a professor at Santa Fe Community College as well as a freelance producer, wanted to get coffee with me and discuss the script. So we did that. I went to coffee. I explained the whole proof of concept vision, and he said he would be willing to help me. And so, you know, I think it's just, you can't, like, you just have to bother people. You have to be annoying. You have to, like, be a pest. And, like, that's just, like, really the only way it gets done, because I think when you wait for things to happen, like, they never will. And, you know, for me personally, like, I knew that there's nothing else I was interested in doing. There's nothing else that I could do. And so it's a need. Like, I need to make it happen.
That's kind of very similar to what I wanted. What I wanted to ask you next was like, you told me, and I shared a similar sentiment that you said, this feels right to me. I need to do this. I can't see myself doing things. When did you first experience that? And how did you know it was right?
So mine's actually like really specific and like really corny, but it was like crazy because I was walking back from my introduction to geology class, my freshman year of college, and like seriously, and I was listening to that song Kokomo, and randomly like this scene started playing out in my head. Like I'd never written anything before, never tried like writing a screenplay or anything, but I saw the camera angles, I saw the cuts, I saw the music, I saw the colors, everything. And so, and it was like this, again, like it was this out of body experience of, I felt goosebumps all over my body. So I like ran back to my room and like I just like opened my notebook and just kind of like started describing what I was seeing. And like, I swear nothing has ever felt easier. Like I wasn't even thinking, it was just, my hand was like moving without me thinking. So, you know, that feeling was like, I have never felt this feeling in my life before, so I need to follow this. And, you know, just after that, just I became obsessed. Like I couldn't not work on it. So, you know, just, you know, building habits to be like, you know, to make sure that, you know, to, you know, prepare. So like, you know, it was that of like, that feeling of, Spielberg once said, it's like screenwriting is the closest feeling to flying. And like, that's exactly how I feel.
So, of course it helps to have a lot of passion, which it sounds like you do. On set, which can be such a time-sensitive and stressful experience, what were some of the pressures or surprises that you endured or that you that took you by surprise? Like, what did you go through on set?
I mean, I think there was a lot of things. One thing is just being able to have conversations with my actors in the sense of like making sure that my script felt authentic to them as well. So, you know, that was like really a big part of getting on set and making sure everyone's on board. And luckily everyone was. And again, I mean, like one of the biggest surprises is right here. Like Donnie was actually, you know, one of my closest friends from high school, and I just needed a person on set. I needed one more person on set, whether it was extra hands, PA, whatever. And so I asked him to come on, and he was more than willing. And you know, by the end of the first day, he was fully operating as second assistant camera, like a whiz, man. I mean, like he picked it up like that, and like. So for the rest of the set, it was like Eric would always be like, "Where's Donnie?" Like, he was like, "We need Donnie by the camera." So I mean, the stuff like that. Again, playing with lines, you know, on set. You know, just like thinking of ways to just liven it up or change things. I mean, like the whole idea of the end sequence and the crucifixion was discussed a lot on set. Leading up to the day, and I think, you know, we came to the conclusion that again, like that's the best part of set, is just, you know, being able to flesh out ideas with your crew, because I think there's a belief that you get on set and you shoot the script word for word, beat for beat, and like that's almost never the case. And so that was really fun. That was like probably the best. Yeah.
And that's the thing about passion, is like when it comes in its purest form, it's infectious. And other people they can see that difference in you when you like talk about it, when your eyes light up, when you smile more, when like you're running around, you're determined, you make things happen. You know, I hope I've inspired you a little bit, but you certainly have inspired me in terms of like just the motivation that you've given me, like the determination that you have, and even at this early stage in your career, and hopefully an eventual career. I'm sure it will be an eventual career. It's just, you know, it's already here, and I'm so glad to see it.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, I think, yeah, that's the whole thing. I'm excited to be able to like share the piece with, friends and family. And again, like you and I are very like-minded in that respect, in the way that, you know, we care about our crafts, and like, you know, we'll die for our crafts. So I mean, but
I like it, but I don't know.
But yeah.
So my last question for you tonight is, you mentioned to me how. Actually, no, I already asked you that. This is the last question. You said to me that this movie is considered a proof of concept.
Yeah.
What did you hope to prove tonight?
I was hoping. I wanted to prove that I can tell a story efficiently, more than anything, and whether or not it resonates with the audience in the way that I want it to. I think the end goal for me was to tell a story in as efficient a way as possible, and that's what I hope I proved.
Peter Lujan, everybody.